You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Simino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer.
I've hit record. Okay.
Never got promoted back to the world of the living.
Okay, welcome to the world of the living, folks. It is a new episode of our podcast. It is Wednesday. Wow, Wednesday, March 11th. You know, we start recording 15 minutes earlier and the brain's just not working yet. We're gonna start off this week with a topic that I'm personally getting tired of. I know Michael's been tired of it forever. Fred loves it, though. Ready? Waymo. Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. So the NTSB has come up with their preliminary investigation, their review of the investigation that happened in Santa Monica, where in the school zone, the Waymo hit a kid. And Waymo's like, hey, we did nothing wrong, man. And
no, what they were really like was, hey, we did it better than a human.
Yes, right. Yeah. We hit your kids so much better than you meat sack. Oh, boy. But the NTSB, we have a link to it here. They go through the whole thing and saying, this is where it happened, what went on. I don't know. I mean, they weren't speeding as far as we can tell. You know,
no, it looks like there's kind of a 25 mile per hour school zone and a 15 mile per hour school zone very close to each other, but this was in the 25. So I think we discussed before that it may have been a 15 mile per hour zone. And the Waymo was going 17, which technically is over the speed limit. However, it looks like they were well under.
Yeah, but they say part of this is after the collision, a Waymo road assistance agent in Novi, Michigan contacted 911 and later provided the vehicle with directions to move to the curb on 24th Street north of the crash site. So this brings up a couple things. Is one, when did this person in Novi, Michigan get alerted to this? Do they get like, oh, we had a little impact on the sensor? Do we hear a child scream? But further from that is the person in Novi, Michigan provided the vehicle with directions to move to the curb. Is that not a human taking over the driving task?
I mean, I think it pretty clearly is a human taking over part of the driving task. And, you know, there's beyond this specific situation, I think there are a lot of concerns about remote drivers, justified concerns in a lot of areas. And then we see it, you know, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we mainly focused on remote driving in an episode. You know, there's a range of remote driving behaviors from, you know, an RC car through whatever it is that Tesla is doing with its vehicles, where they clearly have someone ready to take over, you know, either that's a remote person or a safety driver in the vehicle at any time, to, you know, what Waymo and Zoox are kind of doing, where they don't want to call these people drivers. They want to call them assistants. Zoox had a really fun name for their, I think it was a tactician is what Zoox is calling them. So they're trying to kind of blur the lines there and ensure that you know, the most of us don't really understand the process that's going on there, and also blur the lines of liability in some respects. I mean, if someone is not deemed a remote driver or somehow responsible for the vehicle's actions, it's going to be much harder to, you know, bring that person or hold that person accountable for their mistakes. So there's a lot going on here beyond this crash, I think. And if you look into the way that, you know, Waymo is describing situations versus, you know, the way that others might look at those situations, there's a lot to resolve in the law and in our approach to safety as we move forward with autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, the NTSB is still investigating this specific incident. Once I guess we get an update, we will let you know. But continuing in the world of Waymo, now this is either, I don't know which my gaslight is this week, okay? Because there's this Fast Company article, which is okay. It's a very long article about, it's titled, Uncovered Records Reveal the Hidden Cost of Waymo Robotaxis on San Francisco Streets. And it goes into basically saying how the Waymos, as we know, will crap out in the middle of the street, and then the police and emergency first responders have to get in there and be unpaid valets, which is great. And they document a lot of this stuff. Waymo says things like, Waymo is committed to continuous improvement, says Levante Cavalcante, who serves as Waymo's director of operations. Like that. We're all committed to continuous improvement. This is an AV company, not a yoga class. This is nonsense.
Are we?
I don't know. I love ice cream too much. But some of the issue I have here is the article itself. They start linking to, as if it's factual, is some dubious opinions, like saying that Waymos are potentially safer than humans. And they link to an article in Nature, which is deeply flawed. This research. It links to that New York Times op-ed piece, which we talked about with the doctor who has no background in auto safety and was really just an unpaid fool for Waymo and Waymo itself for its safety records.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so
Anthony,
much.
Just so you know, you're leading into my.
I know that's why. That's why I'm sticking. I know you want to hit Waymo.
Poaching.
I'm not.
You're an intellectual poacher.
I'm not.
I'll stay away from Fred's gaslight and just note that there is so much nonsense on the internet today, written by people with little understanding or with an agenda, that it's kind of a lot. It's become a lot like data. You can pick and choose your data to make an argument. You can pick and choose the links you want that can say the types of things you want to structure your argument. So it's not, we see this all the time, right? In all sorts of articles, particularly around AVs, which is an area that is, continually developing. And there's just a lot of novelty in this area. And that's going to lead to misinformation, disinformation, and, frankly, a lot of unknowns that contribute to this kind of, writers grasping for information wherever they can get it.
Yeah. So, Fred, my gaslight is really the Fast Company article itself. That's who it is. And I don't think they're intentionally doing it. I think this is more of the journalist on a deadline and kind of being like, well, here's some information. It was in the New York Times. It must be good. Here's something in Nature.
It's an incompetent, lazy journalist.
Right.
And my gaslight goes into exactly how and why that's so.
Take it away, Mr. Perkins.
All right. So we're talking about this article by Fast Company. And the title of that is Uncovered Records Reveal the Hidden Costs of Waymo Robotaxis on San Francisco Streets. So that's fine. There's a lot of that. We'll go into more of that in the town later. But quoting from it, research suggests that autonomous cars can outperform human drivers and are even less likely to be involved in serious accidents. This links back to a New York Times article, and that New York Times article in turn references, information provided by Waymo on their website. And so I took a little bit deeper dive into that, and the Waymo references 3 different papers, all of which were based on data that was produced in 2022. So very early versions of Waymo Driver, when it was still restricted to low-speed operations in a limited area. So you can't really generalize this into the modern versions of the software, the current driver, which is several generations removed from the data that they claim justifies their dramatic reductions in accidents. So I looked at those 3 references, and first is titled The Match Case Control Analysis of Autonomous versus Human-Driven Vehicles. And the key statement in there is the analysis suggests that accidents of vehicles equipped with advanced driving systems generally have a lower chance of occurring than human-driven vehicles in most of similar accident scenarios. However, accidents involving advanced driving systems occur more frequently than human-driven vehicle accidents under dawn, dusk, or turning conditions, which is 5.25 and 1.98 times higher, respectively. So this article says that it's producing lower, that AVs are producing lower accident rates. But then when it puts the numbers on it, the accident rates are actually 5 or twice as high as the human-driven vehicles based on their data.
And that article actually included ADAS systems, so it shouldn't even be remotely relevant to an overall analysis of ADAS.
Right. So that's one of my points. There's a lot of irrelevancy in these studies underlying the Waymo publication on their own website. Also point out that these are touted as being peer-reviewed, but there's no evidence that anybody outside of Waymo employees ever was involved in these studies. So all of the names that they attach to it are all Waymo employees. The second reference, the data on self-driving cars is clear. We have to change course. This is the one by Jonathan Slotkin, who is a neurosurgeon, which I'm not sure how that qualifies him to be a statistician associated with self-driving vehicles, but that's okay. Watch out if you need neurosurgery, I guess. The self-driving car company, Waymo, recently released data. Okay, so where is the data? The three references are, as I said, by Waymo, based on data from 2022, which is not even remotely related to the current operating system. And the one by Scanlon says this study focused exclusively on data from 2022. It was actually published in 2024. And then the second one is a comparison of Waymo rider-only crash data to human benchmarks as 7 million miles in 2024. Well, they're now saying they've been up to, 150, 200, some many hundreds of millions of miles. So this is based on very early information, a different version of the software than the current using now, and a different version of the actual vehicle itself than they're using now. So the relevance of one to the other is not clear. But quoting from the article, the direction and significance of comparisons in any property damage or injury outcome group are inconclusive due to difficulties in estimating and matching human benchmark. So one of the key documents underlying all of this says it's irrelevant and inconclusive. And the third one is titled Dynamic Benchmarks, Spatial and Temporal Alignment for ADS Performance Evaluation. And in this article, they don't make any claims at all about the reduction in accidents associated with the automatic drivers. All it talks about is how if you use different methods of analysis, you come up with different answers. For example, the time of day adjustment in San Francisco, limited to this region due to data availability, resulted in adjusted crash rates 2% lower to 16% higher than adjusted rates, depending on severity level. So the website says 90% reduction. The underlying data says, well, hell, we don't even know. And if you believe it, the data, even though we don't really trust it, it's either 2% lower or 15% higher. So not clear to me, where these claims are coming from. But generally speaking, all of the peers that they reference are Waymo employees. They're not the customary independent reviewers, which are usually involved in, quote, peer review, close quote. It's all old data, doesn't include the latest versions of Waymo driver software or hardware, does not include the bulk of miles driven by Waymo. It's restricted to small areas and low speeds associated with driving before 2022. The comparisons are questionable at best. So I'm nominating this as a great example of fecal locution, which is bullshit emerging from people's mouths, and getting my Gaslight Award for this week.
So who specifically gets the Gaslight Award?
Waymo, because they originated all this nonsense.
Okay.
And it's been filtered through the New York Times and now filtered through, what's that other
Fast
one?
Company.
Yeah, it's multiple
Yeah.
sources at this point. Now, I will say that the article does a pretty good job of looking at the kind of the first responder issue and
Yes.
speaking with some of the folks in San Francisco on the ground. So, you know, we see this a lot, though. We see reporters covering autonomous vehicles often revert to this safety argument that is, you know, at this point, we have, you know, really no way of falling down on one side of the line, safety or not safe, particularly because Waymo is one of many autonomous vehicle companies. And often articles just kind of generalize the whole industry as safe or not, instead of looking at the specific companies operating in their records, which at this point, none of them have enough data to be statistically significant. So any claims of safety are you know, objectionable.
Right. The article is, as Michael was saying, does have some good points in there. It talks about how when these cars basically crap out, the issues that in San Francisco they've been having, where the city had to call 911. The city's 911 service placed more than 31 calls to Waymo's first responder hotline and spent more than 2 hours and 36 minutes of call time trying to contact the company. So the city itself had problems. It got to the point where the mayor of San Francisco had to contact the co-CEO of Waymo, who responded with a thumbs up emoji. Like the absolute balls on this person. Be like, cool, bro. It's all taken care of now. Whereas that's not the issue. The issue is, why are we doing this? From a related article in, I believe it's Futurism, they talk about a hearing at San Francisco, their city council. And I'm going to quote from this article. When Supervisor Bilal Mahmood grilled Waymo representatives on what steps the company was taking to ensure first responders can be helping people in the moment of a crisis, Waymo Sam Cooper, an incident response specialist, had pointed to how Waymo had helped train 1,000 first responders in San Francisco with its online program. So basically saying, Waymo's stance is, no, we're not going to fix our shit. We're going to train you to fix it. And you're not going to get paid for that, but we're going to train you for free. And when our cars break down and Uber Eats driver's too busy, we're going to make the cops do it, or we're going to make a fireman do it. Like the absolute hubris.
It's government paid babysitters. You know, it's just another level of subsidies.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is just pure nightmare. But there's another, just one more quote from this article here from Futurism. This is Mary Ellen Carroll, Executive Director of San Francisco Department of Emergency Management, warned that the frequency that the police and firefighters have to respond to immobilized Waymos was becoming a public safety issue. Quoting, what has started to happen is that our public safety officers and responders are having to be the ones to physically move the cars. In a sense, they're becoming a default roadside assistance for these vehicles, which we do not think is tenable. So these are two great articles to look at. We've got links to them in the details. Obviously, anytime they reference could be safer, maybe it's safer, take a gallon of salt, then get yourself to the ER because you might have a stroke.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's too much. It's a little gallon of salt. Look, we start 15 minutes early. I'm all
wrong
messed up.
side of the bed.
The clock's changed. Weird things have happened to myself. But okay, so my gaslight was the Fast Company itself. Fred's was Waymo because he's trying to keep it original. And then Michael, time for your gaslight.
All right, I'm going to my latest gaslight involving the media and descriptions of, a provision from the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that required alcohol detection technology in vehicles. Now, the title of the article pretty much gives away that it's nonsense. It's federal surveillance tech becomes mandatory in new cars by 2027. Okay, let's unpackage that. So the provision is Section 24220 of the IIJA. That's been essentially sitting there now for 5 years, mandating NHTSA to do something in this area. And all NHTSA has done is issue an advance notice of proposed rulemaking that asked more questions than had very few answers. But the statute itself does not mandate any sort of surveillance tech, much less federal surveillance tech. This article gets it completely wrong there. What the statute mandates is a system, whatever that system might be, that can detect the presence of impaired driving. Now, whether that is a driver monitoring system, whether that is an air sampling technology that can detect the driver's alcohol through their breath, whether it's one that can detect the driver's alcohol levels through, a scan of their finger, is one thing. But that's something, that NHTSA and the government haven't worked out yet. It's certainly not going to be worked out by 2027. So the entire title of the article is wrong. It's not becoming mandatory in new cars by 2027. In fact, if they wrote the rule today, it wouldn't be mandatory until 2030 at a minimum, I believe. And so, we're talking about something that at the rate NHTSA is moving in with this current administration is probably not going to be making it into cars until the mid 2030s. I hope. And so this is the kind of journalism that this is the true lazy journalism, as we were talking about earlier. This takes talking points from people, whether they're, politicians or, these people who think they're freedom fighters out there preventing federal surveillance from occurring. But ultimately here, it's not the federal government who's, even if these systems, even if they decide to put this technology into cars as some type of camera and, a system that physically or actively monitors what you're doing in your car, there are no requirements that information be retained, right? That information can be immediately deleted by the vehicle in its decision-making process as to whether you're drinking that day, never used again. It's ultimately going to be up to the manufacturers to determine whether or not this information is available to them via data or to you, and whether they can sell it or not. So it's not federal surveillance that you hear that you should be scared of. It's corporate surveillance. So if for all of these problems, and in the interest of time, because I could probably spend a lot longer on this one, I'm going to give this let's see who wrote this article. It's DaCosta. I believe he is the founder of Gadget Review. He's going to get my gaslight of the week for a really, really bad, ignorant article.
Yeah, I had to look into who this person was. And I believe you're right, Michael. It's the person behind Gadget Review. Looking at their LinkedIn profile, they're brand friendly is essentially their tagline. This might be too harsh, and I'm sure their mother loves them, but no, this is somebody who couldn't tech bro enough to become a tech bro. And it's like
still trying to become a tech bro.
Still trying to become a tech. Instead, they're like those fish around a shark.
Remora.
Remora. Not if does a remora have a remora? Because that's kind of what this guy is. As you look at it, this is utter nonsense. Michael, hands down, you are the winner of this week's Gaslight, specifically because I had somebody I know came to me saying this was a real thing and it's being in use right now. And I took out our tinfoil and wrapped it around their head.
Look, I would say, yes, be concerned that manufacturers are using internal and external vehicle cameras and all sorts of sensors on your car and saving that data and selling it to insurance companies, selling it to, whoever they want to that's willing to pay for it. Yes, that's a concern. But in the context, blaming this law and in the context of this law, which solely goes after, is solely like interested in passive alcohol detection to prevent drunk driving, right? Has no interest whatsoever in retaining that data, storing it, and selling it. These are all things that the manufacturers are doing on the side of safety over here. So, postulating that this is some kind of federal surveillance is nonsense.
And this is a proposed rulemaking for comment. This is not the law.
It's mandated that NHTSA take a look at this and hopefully make a rulemaking on it in the future and get this into all vehicles. But, it was mandated that NHTSA reach a determination by a certain point and then mandate this technology by 2027. But as usual, as we discussed, ad nauseum on this podcast, the agency is unforgivably in some circumstances and incredibly slow when getting rulemakings out there. And the DADS technology and the other technologies that are out there, the DADS technology is probably ready to start being integrated into vehicles right now, but they're having trouble finding manufacturers, shocker, that are willing to support that process. And then there are other technologies coming down the road that can do a similar job using different types of detection formats. But at this point, it's just way, way behind. And thinking that NHTSA is going to get this into cars by next year is beyond absurd.
Well, listeners, if you suffer from ad nauseum, go to autosafety.org and click on donate. Not guaranteed to cure anything except continue the funding of this show and all the wonderful work that the Center for Auto Safety does. For 50 years, we've been over 50 years. Over how many years in that? 53?
54.
55. Look at
56.
The longer this podcast goes, the more years get added on. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. Someone who's not going to click on donate is Jeff Bezos. And let's talk about Zoox. So Zoox
he wouldn't be allowed to click on donate.
As an individual, he could, not as a corporation. No,
it's hard to disconnect from that, right?
Wow.
I mean, we're not taking money from Elon or Bezos or any of this guy,
but from his ex-wife.
Absolutely.
Yes, there you go. Please, Mackenzie, donate. It will piss off your ex-husband. Oh, that's the new fundraising model. Find these billionaires with their spouses. Piss off your ex-spouse. Come on. Elon's exes, that's enough to fund us for centuries. Okay, back to Zoox. So Zoox is the little toaster Pixar looking car that doesn't have brakes, steering wheels, mirrors, all this stuff. Yep. That's doing test runs right now in a limited run in Las Vegas and I believe somewhere out in the Bay Area in California. Anyway, they're
in San Francisco.
Yeah, so they have well, now NHTSA is saying, hey, can we get some public comment on what people think of this? And so we think, hey, this is great. No. Well,
what's happened? I mean, they submitted a petition. I believe it was in fall of last year. NHTSA, announced that they had received it. And you can look on the government regulation site and see some of the petition. A lot of it's redacted, particularly in the very interesting parts. But essentially, what Zoox is doing with that petition, beyond the usual, gaslighting of everyone reading it with the idea that autonomous cars are going to save us in the next few months, is petitioning for an exemption from some very specific federal motor vehicle safety standards that apply to things used by the human driver: mirrors, windshield wipers. There's even a part in there where they're petitioning around sun visors because they don't have sun visors in the vehicle, and yet their belief is that the motor vehicle safety standards require one in some respects. And so we still haven't been able to see or review all of their submissions to NHTSA because I think some of that stuff is still popping up in the docket. But we'll talk about it more in the future. But for now, I think it's just important that, our readers be alerted to the fact that, there's an opportunity to comment on this. And I think it's going to be coming up in about a month. To voice, your opinion on, what do you think about the safety of these vehicles and, whether they've met the burden of showing that in the absence of meeting these federal motor vehicle safety standards, they're going to be as safe as the vehicles operating on our road now. I'd say it's kind of it's hard to determine from their submission because so much is redacted, and it's almost an exercise in futility trying to comment on a document when some of the most pertinent parts of that document aren't available for view by the public. So that's a challenge we're all facing, as we monitor the auto industry generally, is simply a sharp lack of information. When companies want to keep something confidential, they do, and more companies are taking advantage of that when it comes to NHTSA safety inquiries and other things. They're simply not turning over data like they used to, or not turning over a lot of things and making a lot of redactions to information that might previously have been available. So It's a tough job, I guess I'm saying.
So I want to know, let's pretend this is as safe a vehicle as a Waymo. And so as we know, Waymos, as we've talked about, they will stall in the middle of the road and just block traffic and whatnot. But an emergency first responder, a fancy valet, could get into the vehicle and move them because there's steering wheels and pedals and whatnot.
Yeah, like we saw in Austin a couple of weeks ago.
Right. Like we see almost weekly with a Waymo. So do we have any idea how that problem is solved with the Zooks? Is it just small enough people push it?
I think they're assuming that it is going to be operated, remotely in those situations. And maybe, I don't know if they have someone that can come out and plug a joystick into the car to move it, or if they're just going to have to rely on, tow operators and others to get these things out of the road when they inevitably stop and delay traffic. So, and perhaps, and I was glancing through the submission this morning, and they do have a fairly large section on remote operations. However, that's one of the most significantly redacted sections of the whole thing. So I'm not sure if, that while that may be answered in there, I don't think that we're able to see that information.
Well, once public comments open, we'll let you know.
People need to recognize that these Zooks vehicles allow people to sit frontwards or backwards or sideways because all those positions are available. None of them have ever been crash tested.
Right.
So there's absolutely no data on whether or not this vehicle hitting another vehicle or a stationary object, or this vehicle being hit by something else, will protect the people inside who are only using restraint systems that were designed for people facing forward in the vehicle.
Right. Yeah, and that's a concern. And there's some weird, there's like they developed this new airbag type system for the side seated passengers that supposedly is going to protect against this, but it's it's impossible to say. It's not something the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards have even remotely wrapped their heads or its head around, or whatever the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards collective head is. But also, it's very novel seating system, and a lot of companies, I think in the bus industry, have struggled with the problem of side seating and protection in the past. So, it really raises the question of, beyond these human operating controls, this is a vehicle that doesn't meet Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards and has a novel crash protection system. And how do you make a safety assessment in that type of situation? I don't know that you can.
No data.
Yeah.
Hey, no data is the way to be, because then we don't have to prove nothing, right? Something. Hey, Fred, how you feeling Towish? Because we've talked a lot about vehicles having to be moved by municipal workers.
So the TOW this week is about consumer subsidies of private company finances that are unknown to the consumers for the most part, and what to do about it. So this is a little bit broader range than normally. So nuclear power industry, inflated rates for unprofitable nuclear facilities, unknown costs for high-level radioactive waste disposal, unreasonable limits on utility nuclear liability, streamlined approval of lower power nuclear stations, a la Bill Gates data center power, and limitations on the right to sue. Those are all problems that are associated with unknown subsidies by all of us consumers. So basically, if one of these plants blows up, you are screwed because you're not going to be able to get money for your now contaminated house and property from anybody. Congress, in its wisdom, has said that that's okay, guys. You can go ahead and blow up your reactors. No problem. So the remedy for that is there should be no approval for uneconomic nuclear stations, particularly these stations that the data industry now wants to spot all around the country to run their data centers. Every one of them is indemnified against their true liability. So there should be no liability waiver or limitations for these stations, and commercial operators should bear the full cost of the waste disposal that they're generating. All of that right now relies upon public subsidy. Then we move into oil. Oil, the unknown or unacknowledged subsidies from you, the consumer, are special tax benefits, generous bankruptcy rules that inhibit remediation. Basically, people can just walk away from their spent wells and holes in the ground, whatever they've got. They also use eminent domain for pipeline construction. Basically, the government steps in and says, your need for the pipeline is more important than your need for your house and property. So doesn't seem fair to me. And the companies also enjoy insulation from environmental liability, in part through this ability to just walk away from the wells due to the bankruptcy laws. So to remedy that, there should be the removal of special oil business tax credits and deductions, and there should be assignment of pollution remediation costs to the industry, not for the public at large to pick up the check for remediating these old wells and all the other crap they leave lying around. But our focus is on cars, of course. So let's talk about AVs. So how do we, the public, subsidize AVs? Well, we give them free risk and penalty-free use of public roads and rights of way. We've paid for those public roads. Why should we give them to the industry for free? Because they're not going to send their profits back to us. The AVs, basically, they've confiscated the right to sue as the price of using their services. So that's another subsidy from the public. If you have to sue, you're just out of luck. You go to forced arbitration. They enjoy the free use of public safety officers and regulator staff to support their operations, right? Police have to come and move the vehicles. They don't say that they're going to take care of that themselves. They just say, we're going to train the police in how to do it. Somebody's going to pay for those police. They enjoy consequence-free involvement in injury and death collisions because there's basically no mechanism to hold them accountable. They are destroying public investment in urban transportation assets. That's their whole purpose, to take advantage of people's frustrations with having to take a bus to instead fill the streets with AVs and reduce the number of people using public transportation, which has the effect of destroying the public investment, making it too expensive, and trying to start a death spiral for the public transportation industry, the same way they did this with public transportation back in the 50s, killing off all the bus companies, particularly in Los Angeles. And, of course, they enjoy insulation from liability via compulsory arbitration. When you click that box that says you accept the terms of use, you are giving them great license to do damage to you without the possibility of being sued. That's another subsidy by the public that you probably don't think about when you're signing up for this AV service. So to fix the problem, there should be prohibition of compulsory arbitration. There should be reasonable fees for safety officer time in lieu of tickets for legal violations, right? There's no mechanism to give a ticket now. So I would say that the police or that the state or the local municipality should charge them $1,000 per instance as a service fee when they have to spend their time and assets enforcing the law, regardless of whether or not there's a legal problem with the AV's violation of the law. There should be a service fee for the police to try to manage this machinery. I think $1,000 per instance is probably a reasonable number. There should be reasonable fees for public official participation in resolving operational defects or traffic interruption. And I think, everybody have to personally get involved in fixing these things. So the fire department has to get involved in fixing these things, or anybody else who works for the public. There are costs associated with it. So I think there should be a minimum $10,000 per instance service fee whenever a human being who's employed by the municipality or is otherwise an emergency responder has to interrupt their work in order to service the corporate assets. And finally, I think there should be confiscation of vehicles that are involved in injury or death to the public or for impeding public safety officer activity or response while using civil forfeiture laws. These are well established in, I guess, every state, Michael. I don't know, but civil forfeiture laws seems to be a vehicle that the cities and states can use whenever these vehicles are out of control and injuring or killing somebody. So those are my suggestions for this week, and take them as you will. But I think clearly the AV industry is out of control, that we, the public, are subsidizing them in many ways. I haven't even gone into the upgrades of the electrical system that are needed to support these electric vehicles. But there are ways of doing this, I think, that don't require litigation every time. I think we can do it through service fees and civil forfeiture laws in ways that benefit the public and somehow equalize the financial impact that the AV companies are putting on the public by forcing them to pay the fees, service fees required to remediate the problems. That's it. That's what I got.
Those fees and the things that states could do are threatened by a lot of the preemption language that the AV industry is supporting at the federal level. So that's one of the reasons why we so vigorously oppose that language, because it removes options for localities that want to, essentially make a fair trade on letting this technology come into their cities versus, subsidizing the industry.
Well, one of the things you said there, Fred, is part of their goal is to get people off of mass transit like buses and get everybody into AVs. Well, I think researchers at the University of Texas Arlington might agree with you. From usa.streetsblog.org, I'm going to quote, researchers at the University of Texas Arlington found in a new meta-analysis of 26 earlier studies that vehicle miles traveled would increase if U.S. cities made a major shift away from human-driven automobiles, with the papers collectively predicting about a 6% bump in average VMT, which stands for varicose
vehicle miles traveled.
Right? Vehicles miles traveled. My version was going to be better.
It was going to be bad.
It was. I know it was. I had nothing.
I preempted you.
Yeah, the V just threw me off. Anyway, worse, they'd still increase more than 5% if people shifted away from personally owned cars towards shared or not autonomous taxis instead. That might not seem like a huge increase, but even those modest-sounding increases would be completely sufficient to break the road by jamming up key intersections, study author Stephen Mattingly told Vox. Completely break the road. A 6% increase, like even a 5% increase, that sounds dramatic. I like it, but it sounds dramatic.
Well, I mean, I think it probably takes into account the fact that we're bumping up against, our roads already being broken by traffic at the moment. And a 5% increase without changes to infrastructure could be significant. But this is, this is something we've continued to hear from the AV industry, that they're, going to make our roads more efficient, but they're, not always accounting, we don't think, accurately for, the deadhead miles specifically that these AVs are going to be traveling from point to point. In this article, and then I think in this study, they call these EVMT. So I guess that's electronic or electric vehicle miles. It's confusing if you say electric vehicle, because it does kind of confuses it with electric vehicles, but the EVMT, they're saying could double the number of miles that are traveled in cars in cities in a day. So that's, that we are not headed in the right direction here by further subsidizing companies that are only going to increase the problems on our road and take away, and also at the same time taking away funding, as Fred noted, from our public transportation agencies.
Well, good to know that the two of you live in areas heavily covered by mass transit.
No, I do not. And even in Washington, D.C., I would argue that the transit there, the metro, stops in, a very few number of locations. It's, if you compare it to the subway in New York, I think it's pretty obvious, what the problem is. They're just, even once you get to a stop, you have a long way to go. And, that there are the lines on the metro in DC, completely miss a lot of areas. Don't extend far. I mean, I could go on for a while about it, but having lived in an area of DC that didn't have the greatest access to the metro, it's frustrating that in a city of that size that there aren't more better options for people who want to commute via public transportation in a similar amount of time as they could in a car. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. You can take the bus and a metro and do a combination that's going to take you 3 hours round trip every day to get to work versus an hour if you drive a car. That's a problem.
But my magic autonomous vehicle, I can sit in there, it drives itself, and I can catch up on all my work-related emails. I don't feel safe doing that in public transit. What if someone wants to steal my BlackBerry?
You could do that in an Uber.
Okay. So let's get into something a little more positive. IIHS has a report about intelligent speed assist. We've all been fans of intelligent speed assist, and I'm going to quote from the executive summary. This is about fleet. So this is about 18-wheelers, essentially. If I'm right? Okay. So quoting, largely fleets with active ISA, intelligent speed assist, found that ISA can meaningfully reduce speeding and associated safety risks and even promote cost savings. The two main motivations cited by fleets engaged in the study were safety for drivers and other road users, and financial considerations such as reducing speeding violations and improving safety scores that can influence insurance costs. I love it. Like at that point, I don't even have to read anything else because this is basically set. I love the fact that these fleets are like, yeah, let's put this in there so we don't have truckers carrying a massive load of string beans to Utah speeding down the highway.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we want every car to have at some point. You know, the trucks often have, the type of active intelligent speed assistance that we'd like to see in vehicles. You know, there's all sorts of types of what they call intelligent speed assistance, but a lot of them are very passive and don't really force the speeders to take any modification to their behavior. Don't have any type of governor that would prevent that person from reaching dangerous speeds or even, semi-dangerous speeds. They're basically just essentially warning systems that can be turned off at any time versus what we're talking about in these fleet systems are, actual governing of the vehicle's speed, preventing them from achieving, basically anything over the local speed limits or within a certain range of the local speed limits. And, using whether it's cameras or, some type of geographic information or roadside detection, that type of thing to determine the speed limits. And it really, this is what we ultimately want there to be in cars to actually prevent speeders from doing what they do and endangering everyone else on the road. So it's interesting, how, it looks like, many of these companies they had a couple of bumps at the start getting this in and getting their truck drivers' reactions mediated and all of that. But they ultimately saw that it was going to save them money, prevent crashes, and basically improve their operations, which is what we would hope that active ISA will do to our big United States fleet as a whole, including all of us that are out there driving.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I just heard on one of the F1 teams talking about their pit tops. Let's try that again. Hey, everybody, go to autosafety.org, click donate, and then I'll learn how to speak properly about their pit stop speed. And they described it as slow is smooth, smooth is fast, which is apparently also a Navy SEAL saying.
All right,
and I
get that.
Yeah, and I see that with this intelligent speed assist because the main problem everybody's experienced is you got a whole bunch of people speeding, and then they're slamming on the brakes and speeding and slowing down, speeding and slowing down, and that just causing a larger delay throughout. And also accidents, your fuel mileage isn't as great as you keep changing your speeds throughout. So I love this.
That sounds like a shortened version of the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
Moral, right?
But with Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
Or cool. F1 pit stop teams.
Much cooler version.
Yeah.
Not using cute animals.
Absolutely not. All right. So before we jump into recalls, have to do it. I'm sorry. We haven't really mentioned them at all this week. Oh, Michael is cringing. He is cringing. It is, who was it, Fred? Who is it? It's Tesla, Fred. You're right. There you go. So real quick, we have an article This is, we're going to link to titled Tesla Full Self-Driving Drives Through Railroad Crossing Barriers in Viral Video. That's it. Really, you just watch this. It is horrific. Somebody films their car, going down the road, the railroad crossing arms come down. You can see this clearly. There's no glare. It's not the middle of the night. It's a nice sunny day. They come down and the car just runs through the first one and then runs through the second one. And the driver's like, oh shit, pulls over. Tesla, garbage. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a known problem. I think Senator Blumenthal and Markey actually wrote a letter to NHTSA about this late last year. I think it was a Tesla that basically drove up onto the tracks and they had to leave the vehicle before the train hit the vehicle. But this has been documented. I think NBC documented this happening, more than 40 times, bad behaviors around trains by Tesla's full self-driving. So yet another thing that needs to be addressed by NHTSA's currently ongoing investigation into Tesla, which yet again, last week, Tesla requested an extension on reporting their engineering studies and other data to NHTSA because they just can't get it together fast enough over there because they have so many ongoing safety investigations. So something that we're really concerned about, not just the railroad crossings, but a lot of operations involving Tesla's full self-driving, whether that's in their robotaxis or in the human monitored commercial vehicles.
I think I just figured it out.
Well, they're all human monitored.
I think I figured this out based off of Fred's town. The Teslas are designed to go on railroad tracks because they think that railroads are bad for
safe.
Business. So
I thought you were going to say because they're safer mode of transportation.
No, they're trying to block railroads. So stop funding railroads because you got to spend all this money repairing railroad tracks and railroad cars. This is just a waste of taxpayer money. Get rid of it all.
Isn't that something the auto industry did in the past?
Well, that's welcome to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Speaking of Los Angeles, let's go to recalls. I don't know. First up, Ford. Holy cow, 604,533 vehicles. The 2020-22 Ford Explorer, 2020, same year as the Lincoln Aviator, same year as the Ford Escape, the Lincoln Corsair. Inoperative front windshield wipers may result in reduced visibility or loss of visibility in certain conditions, increasing the risk of crash. Oh, their wipers don't work?
Yep, basically. I think it's there's some type of misalignment in the motor's cover terminal, essentially. There's a problem there. This one looks like owners are going to get an interim notice in March, but I don't think they're going to have a full fix available until mid-May.
Next up, holy cow, Ford, 889,950 vehicles. Hey, it looks like the same vehicles again. 2022 Ford Escape, the Lincoln Corsair, the Lincoln Aviator, the Ford Explorer, the 2020 to 2024 Ford Explorer, though. God damn it. A rear view camera that does not display a correct image while in reverse gear can reduce the driver's view as what is behind the vehicle. Blah, blah, blah. Rear view cameras. That's it. This is a mess up with their printed circuit board. It looks like.
Yeah, and apparently it inverts the image on the screen. I'm not sure if that's upside down or left to right, but either way, it's not going to give you good data to operate your vehicle with. So, this is another one that looks like this one actually is going to be about a little over a month before owners hear about it, but it doesn't look like they're going to have the remedy available at that point. They don't give a date for the final owner notification when your remedy is going to be available. So until that time, be sure to use your mirrors and don't rely on the potentially inverted image coming through your touchscreen.
Well, since you just did a review camera, I'm going to jump into a personal one here. My car has this sour milk smell. Is this related to transmission flow? Or to coolant fluid? That's what the internet told me.
I don't want to speculate on that.
There's nothing no one was eating ice cream or dropping a milkshake in there.
I actually dumped a Chick-fil-A peach milkshake all over my dog and the front seat a few months ago. And luckily I avoided the sour milk smell. But I often Volkswagens, which I use frequently, sometimes they seem to have, even going back to the 80s, some type of problem with the AC system that I don't know if it's fungus or something, but they get this funky smell after a while. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I don't know. Someone's going to check it out tomorrow and charge me way too much, I'm sure. All right. Next recall. Ford. Goddamn Ford. 849,310 vehicles. The 2021 to 26 Ford Bronco. Does Jim Farley get paid by the recall? Is that what it is?
These are massive recalls, by the way. I mean, these are all very, very large recalls that they're coming out with.
Oh my God. And the 2021 to 2024 Ford Edge. Another rear view camera. God, why? A rear view camera that does not display an image while in reverse gear. Okay, yeah. The accessory protocol interface modules reaching temperatures of 105 degrees Celsius. Holy cow. And initiating a temporary thermal shutdown. Wow. That's a spicy meatball in that car.
That is. That probably shouldn't be happening, right? That's a very high temperature, especially if you've got electronics involved in this issue. So looks like owners are going to be hearing about a remedy here in late March, early April. So this one looks like a remedy is actually coming along. Of course, it's not the hardware that's heating to 105 Celsius. That's the problem here. They're gonna do this with software. So we'll see.
Of course, they're just gonna put ice cubes in your car.
Yeah.
So what's the vehicle total of Ford so far this year? Because it's just March.
I think these are their three largest recalls so far. They're once again, dominating the recall charts this year. Although, I think they are definitely behind last year's pace. I think somewhat significantly, but they're still on pace to, have a number 2 all-time record. But who knows? All
right. Last recall, Honda. USA. All right. 65,135 vehicles. The 2024 Acura ZDX, the 2024 Honda Prologue. If the instrument cluster display goes blank while driving, the driver may be unable to view critical information. Is this rear view? If the infotainment display does not display the rear view camera image when the vehicle is shifted, God damn it.
That's part of it. It's also, it looks like it's mainly, like speedometer and warnings,
which is worse.
So this is, they're all bad.
Software defects, that's they're claiming.
Yeah, particularly bad. So I think the owners will have a fix for this fairly soon. They're going to, of course, update the radio control. This is coming from the radio control module, right? Remember how we often talk about air gapping and preventing, infotainment from interacting with safety? Well, even Honda's not doing it right. They're going to improvise and improve their radio control module software to correct the issue, and that recall should be available in late April.
Oh boy, if you have these vehicles, get your recalls taken care of. And with that, that's our show. Thanks so much. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. We'll be back next week with maybe some updates about everybody. Batteries.
Hey.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.